Kate, thank you very much. My name is Martin Belton. I'm from Nicholls. I'm here with Kate Nicholls. Kate's the creative director of Sponge UK. Kate's just done a fantastic session on the role of games in digital learning. She's been telling us why games can be really effective. She's been talking about the different types of games. But Kate, tell us about why games can be really effective in e-learning.
Well, good question. I've had quite an enjoyable time talking about this actually. So one of the things that came up is that we've been doing a lot of research on games and as well as games production. So we have been working with Carl Kapp on games. He's a well-known person in the industry who talks a lot about them and their use in learning. And he says that when combined with instruction, games can really enhance our ability to absorb more information and more knowledge, and they can engage us more. So we thought, well, that's worth exploring more, because since we're talking at this conference about moving away from the sort of click next type e-learning that people don't terribly enjoy, we thought what would be nice is to explore games in a bit more detail. Why do they work? What makes them effective? And he uses 4 techniques for that: progression, autonomy, mastery, and engagement. So those are the kinds of methods that we think about, and I tend to think of those 4 all together to make quite an engaging, interesting, memorable learning experience.
So when we're talking about games,
Yeah.
what are we actually talking about? What different types of games are there?
So we explored 2 types in the talk. One was structural games and the other one was content games. The structural games are where you apply things like badges and leaderboards and game-based elements and scores and timers to an experience without necessarily changing the content. And on the other hand, the content-based games would be more like where you change the content from the ground up and create a fully immersive experience. So when it comes to cost, probably the structural stuff is probably more accessible. But actually what we found at Sponge is that when we're doing content-based games, they don't have to be that expensive either, and you can use different techniques to achieve that. So those would be the 2.
So when can we use games in e-learning?
Yes, a good question, and one that we get asked quite a lot. So what we tend to advise is when there's a real risk to people's life or job or their work or their safety or their health, and there's a real risk and a real consequence that could be important to them, that's a good time that you could consider using a game.
So how do I think like a games designer? How do I drive games into my e-learning?
There are certain techniques that you can use to think like a game designer, and I think probably the first one is to think visually rather than thinking with words, creating a more visual experience rather than just writing lots of text on a page. That's one shift from instructional design, probably more towards game thinking. When it comes to instruction, moving from instruction to intuition, so thinking a bit more about the user interface and the experience that the person's going to go through. And I think also we talk a lot at Sponge about adding game juice, which means things like
Game juice.
Yeah, game juice. Yeah, we get that from our games designers. So that means things like adding music and sound effects and the kind of auditory feedback that you get that really kind of amplify an experience and give you a bit more. It makes things feel more game-like.
Brilliant. Kate Nicholls, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.